I love the University of Montana, and I love the College of Business. You look back, and that was a long time ago, back in the early 80s. But I tell you, the experience I had and the people I met, both that are friends of mine today and even the professors that I was able to work, I just had such a wonderful experience.
This is A New Angle, and I'm your host, Justin Angle, marketing professor at the University of Montana College of Business. This podcast is my chance to speak with cool people doing awesome things in and around the great state of Montana. We are proudly underwritten by First Security Bank and Blackfoot. Hey folks, welcome back, and thanks for tuning in. Today, it's my honor to welcome one of my favorite Missoulians to the podcast, Scott Burke. Scott is president and CEO of First Security Bank and a pillar of leadership and integrity in our community. This year, the College of Business honors Scott with the 2020 Outstanding Alumni Award. It is well earned. Scott's contributions to economic development and community health in Western Montana are an inspiration. It was great to learn more about Scott and the values he brings to First Security Bank and the many other organizations he supports. I'm excited for you to hear Scott's story right now. So I'm here today with Scott Burke, President and CEO of First Security Bank. Scott, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Oh, glad to do it, Justin.
Well, this one has been a long time coming. I think you'd either have to be a first-time listener or living under a rock to not know that First Security Bank has been a presenting sponsor, a co-presenting sponsor of this podcast almost since our inception. So I want to just get that on the record and thank you for being a supporter of what we're doing here with the podcast, but more generally, all that you do to support the College of Business, the university, and our community. Let's talk first, Scott. I want listeners to kind of learn a little bit more about you. You've been in this role at First Security Bank for a number of years, a 1985 graduate of the university. Yeah, kind of paint the picture of how you got into banking and got into this particular spot.
It's not, being in banking is not too glamorous, but I'll tell you, when I was in college, I really had no aspirations of becoming a banker. And I don't know. I didn't look at it as being anything that would bring much excitement. Some of my schooling kind of pointed me in different directions. But when I graduated in 85, the economy was a little bleak, and I had to go out and find some work. And I ended up moving to Seattle temporarily. I was interviewing up there, IBM, a couple of companies, and I got a call from a buddy, of course, who saying that their company was interviewing for a manager training position in Southern California, and he said, you should apply, at least come down. We'll be able to spend some time together, even if you don't get or take the job. So I did that. I went down to San Diego and I interviewed for this job, and it was offered to me. And so that's really how I started in the financial services industry. It was a division of Bank of America named Finance America. And so that's kind of what started it. I don't know. I guess what was interesting is really how much I learned, and really what banking was all about, and all the different attributes that came with it, not just domestic, but international business, trade, investments, capital markets, things like that. So when I was put into this training program, which was a couple-year program, it really opened my eyes. Like, oh yeah, this is actually really cool. A lot of avenues you can go in this industry. So I started in the banking business back in 85, and that's where I'm at today.
It seems like more and more that those sort of classic 2-year training programs with these big companies, be it a Bank of America or, when I got out of school in the 90s, that was sort of the program. A lot of folks went to Wall Street and did these 2-year stints with, an investment bank or something like that. Those sort of programs are kind of going away in some ways.
You are right on. I mean, back in the day, like what you were used to when you graduated, that's how the banking industry was trained. The bigger banks especially would have these, really, really cool training programs. And what I think happened over the years, and of course we've had a few ups and downs in the economy over the years, I think what happened is they ended up training all the bankers for the other institutions throughout the U.S.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, if you look at it, I can name 3 people at First Security Bank here that went through one of those training programs and now ended up at the community bank. So I think, back when, the recession we went through 10 years ago, and there were a lot of banks that didn't make it through it or were ultimately acquired. A lot of those programs went away. You just don't see them today like you used to, and it's really too bad. And now us as community bankers, we're trying our best, but boy, we just don't give these candidates the breadth that we were able to get when we were younger.
Indeed. So talk about your move back to Montana when you came back to take the opportunity at First Security, and you progressed into the president role fairly quickly.
Yeah, it was kind of unique. I always, I ended up being in California for 14 years, but if anybody ever asked me, where you lived, I always said, well, I'm from Montana, but I live here. I always knew I wanted to get back, and I was really lucky during that time I was down there that I met a gal from Billings, Montana, and we ended up getting married and having children. And what it really got to is we knew we wanted to get back. Matter of fact, we'd come back to Montana for the holidays, different holidays. We knew we wanted to be in Missoula. I'd come over here. Wasn't sure I wanted to stay in the banking business, but that's really all I knew at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So I talked to bankers a little bit, and my wife and I at the time had 3 young boys, and we thought, boy, it'd be great to be able to raise them here. So that's kind of how it happened. And then, gosh, in 1998 is when Bank of America was bought by Nations Bank. And I had progressed through my career. It was a great career. I loved everything about it down there. But boy, I could see the writing was on the wall that things were changing, and they're changing very quickly. And so I reached out to a few of those bankers that I had met in Missoula, especially Bill Boucher and Hal Frazier, who I was just so impressed with how they had put this bank together, and called them and said, hey, is there anything open? And they really didn't have much open, but they said, we'll hire you as a lender, and we're got a bunch of old people around here. We're going to need some succession planning at some point, so there might be some opportunity. So that's how I got back, and that was 1999.
Sure, and sounds like some wisdom in there, in that you have some clarity with regard to what your family values are and the situation in which you want to raise your family, that you're willing to kind of hitch your wagon to an organization that you believe in, maybe not the role that you are aspiring to, but getting in the door and trying to take an opportunity to make things happen. Sounds like what might have been.
Justin, I got to give a ton of credit to my wife, Tana, who's, always, if you look back on any decisions that we made throughout our life together, she's made the good ones, except maybe picking me. But I'll never forget. We had flown back, and I interviewed again with the bank and the management team at First Security, and they offered me the job and have this lender. And I got out, and we're driving back out to the airport, and I had to pull over into one of the shopping centers. I said, I don't think we can do this. I said, I'm taking an 80% pay cut.
Yep.
And she looked at me and she said, yeah, we'll make it work. And this is where our family needs to be, and this is where our kids need to be raised. We'll make it work. And I said, all right.
Nice.
And I just give her just a ton of credit. She always makes pretty good decisions.
Well, a lot of times those leaps of faith, if you're, if you kind of have a clear vision of where you want to end up, you can jump in a valley to make it happen. A term you've used a couple times in the conversation already is community bank. And so that's, how you would describe First Security Bank. Talk about the difference between, what is a community bank and how is it different than some of these conglomerates that we mentioned earlier in the conversation?
It's really, easy to explain, and you'll get it when I start talking. But I look at my time at a fine institution, Bank of America, and like I said, I had a great career, and what a place to learn banking in an economy like there were throughout Southern California. But it was in some respects it was taking numbers. Looking at numbers and making decisions based on numbers. And I came back here, and the first couple of months I'm back at this bank, I'm going, oh my God, this is real banking. I mean, you are sitting there talking about the individuals, you're talking about the families, you're talking about the histories they've had in the community, you know them, and you're making decisions based on people and their character, which is part of the 4 C's of credit. But that didn't get used much at the big bank. It's just really fun to transition into that where, numbers, there had to be numbers there. But it was a real fun transition for me. And it really makes you able to not only, go to work every day and make decisions, but you get to see, how your labor is generating such positivity in the community, and you're part of that community.
And so how does that work with, we're skipping some steps in terms of getting into your leadership tenure at First Security, but, I'm thinking about those kind of the polls as you described them there, at the community bank level, you're really connecting with individual applicants for credit. You're trying to understand their character, make judgments there. At a larger institution, you're just sort of looking at reams of data and spreadsheets and numbers. I suppose the two polls have value in terms of making smart credit choices. How do you, in your role now, how do you and your team kind of balance the use of data, but also the use of the kind of proverbial eyeball check of the loan applicant?
Well, I think that's why we have the regulatory side of our business also. Over the years, even in the 21 years since I've been back in Missoula, the level of scrutiny coming from our regulators, no matter which group is regulating you, they've tightened up significantly, and they are, in some respects, they're such a good watchdog, looking over our shoulders, making sure not only are we making good decisions just based on character, but having the structure in place in terms of collateral and cash flow and the things that make the deal work. I mean, I've seen a huge change in my career in how we had underwrite credit back in the day, and then it kind of went lax a little bit, and now to back where it is today. You got a lot of checks and balances. Making sure you're doing things are right. And for a company like ours, I think that's good, or any company.
Yeah, and it seems, too, that you have an organization that's got strong commitments to community and strong commitments to equity and diversity. And a lot of that, regulatory regime and internal controls would have to, be thoughtfully constructed to allow you to kind of act on some of those values.
They do, and they require, as you grow. I mean, we don't ever talk about our size, but as your success, the bank continues to grow, and in our business, as you grow, there's factors that come into play, and other policies that become much more critical than they were when you're a small bank. And one of them is the Community Reinvestment Act, CRA. Whereas, we're looked at in terms of our commitment to our communities and helping those most in need, the lower income, those without housing, things like that. We are looked at as much there as we are on the credit side of the bank today. And what's fun about it is I'm never worried about that. I mean, the way this bank was put together and how it grew up, and people that started it and then just brought others in under the same, they created a culture that any success we have is truly due to the community and the community members. So let's be really involved with them, and let's give as much as we can. And that's how I think this bank has grown, and it's become so successful.
Yeah, talk about that a little bit more. You've used that phrase, how how this bank was put together a couple of times, and let's draw that out. What does that exactly mean? How would you describe the culture, and what decisions have you witnessed or been involved in to help bring it to life?
I think it's worth noting, Justin, a little history of this bank. I mean, this bank, I believe it was started in 1974. We're coming up on our 50th anniversary, but I'll tell you, during the 70s and 80s, this thing was a disaster, and it had gone through different ownership and different leadership, and people had ended up in jail. It went all over the gamut. But I think one of the records it held was in the Minneapolis Fed. We held the longest cease and desist order in the history of the bank. So you got to look back at that and say, boy, this thing was just not really well run, and a lot of greedy, I think, individuals part of it, to where then people came in, new ownership, guy by the name of Hal Frazier, who many people out there know and cherish. He was at this bank, and the owner that bought it at the time in the late 80s came to Hal and said, Hal, we're going to need somebody to help us run this thing. I'm not going to be the guy here making every decision. And Hal said, well, I know that Bill Boucher isn't very happy where he's at, and he's one of the best known bankers in the state of Montana. And ultimately, Mr. O'Brien was able to convince Bill to come over. And with Bill and Hal, and then the team that they created, and then ultimately Bill and Hal and the group and a group of local business people bought the bank, they just turned this thing into what they had probably cherished in the other organizations they had worked for. They took the best of what they saw and put it into this thing called First Security Bank. And it just, I got to pull those out sometime, but I did find the recipe cards that Bill had put together when he was first introduced to the staff, kind of lining out how things were going to be from this point forward. And it was about community. It was about family. It was about, we're not going to have parties and celebrations at this bank without inviting your family, because trouble happens when you don't. And I'm not going to be the one making all the money. We're going to share that throughout the ranks. And that is just, and we're going to share that with the community. And that's just what started. And it's been so fun to be part of carrying that on.
Yeah, let's talk about that. I mean, you've been in this president CEO role for a number of years now. How do you kind of try to carry that torch and preserve and invest and adapt that culture, as the community grows and changes?
I stepped into a really great machine, and I just tried to my best to carry on some of those values and some of those processes that have been put in place. But at the same time, as we even became more successful, knowing that we can do even more. And so trying to focus, making sure everybody at the bank has a role in being part of the community. Part of what we've done, and it's always been the case, is 10 to 20% of every officer's performance review is based on community service. And that's fun. And people come into this bank going, oh, geez, I got to do what? I got to sit on boards and volunteer my time. And it's not too much after that they go, oh, wow, how rewarding is this? And how fun it is to be able to get out of the bank and put my talents to use in other ways.
And is there how is that kind of service celebrated internally? Is there some sort of way that, that employees can share stories or talk to each other about what's going, how is it kind of infused into the culture of the organization?
We talk about it every Friday.
Yeah.
We meet every Friday morning at what we call our sales or officers meeting. And we talk about what we did that week. We don't write it down or fill out, call report. We talk about what each officer did that week and what they're involved in. And did you know this is happening? And this week is this nonprofit's fundraiser. And it's that same meeting then that we approve all of our sponsorships and donations. it's not a single person making that. It's the entire group gets a vote on where we invest. And that's both time and money. So it's something that's talked about all the time. And it really what I have seen is people just embrace it, and decisions are made that way. Whereas, gosh, this is a real struggle, but boy, is that needed in this community with everything that we see happening in terms of the degradation of family and things like that. Decisions are made because I just think people care more.
Can you give some examples of how some particular decisions that the officers coming together, sharing some of these stories and this ethic, maybe decisions that wouldn't have happened otherwise?
You look at some of these deals. I mean, a great example that people can see today because it's happening right as we speak. But the YWCA, they knew, and they've known for a long time, that they were not prepared to handle the need in Western Montana and the city of Missoula in the facilities that they had and the way they were operating. And they had talked about it for a long time, what they really needed to do. And the collaboration that they did, bringing private sector and other nonprofits together to say, let's not look at this just one off. Let's look at this holistically. And they came up with, we're gonna need this new facility, and it's gonna be, at the time I can't remember, I think it's $14-16 million facility. We're going, there's no way,
right? Yeah,
that's ever going to happen. But I will tell you that if you drive by 3rd Street, you'll see that thing is going to be completed next year. And the walls are up and there's a roof on it, and inside is being formed. But what happened there is everybody got creative, and Bill Boucher and his wife and others put together a committee along with the YWCA staff to go out and fundraise, and they put together teams. So I think they ultimately raised about $7 million. And then a group in town called MoFi has a product called these New Market Tax Credits. And we're one of the banks in the state that have done a lot of these and understand them. They're complicated deals, but I give credit to my team, Barb Callahan, Brendan Briggs, and the rest, that they understand this, and they were able to present a package to the YWCA to gap what they needed in terms of capital to make this thing happen. So, it's just going the extra mile to figure these things out for the betterment of all.
Yeah, and that's such an important framing, Scott, to think of these instances as opportunities to preserve and extend incredible resources that kind of make this place what it is, rather than, simply seeing, the YMCA as an opportunity to do a deal and make some money. And now you've got such a critical organization that's financially healthy, right? Like it's set up to endure and to thrive. A New Angle is brought to you by First Security Bank and Blackfoot, two cool companies doing awesome things all over Montana.
I'm Larry Summers, Harvard President Emeritus and former Treasury Secretary. You're listening to A New Angle.
Well, they went out and took affiliations with other nonprofits having the same similar issues, and the Interfaith Collaborative is part of that also. And it's really cool when you see everybody start crossing lines and finding the best way to collaborate, because you just can't do it alone.
And so that kind of ethic of service, amongst your core leadership team and your officers. You also have, new employees, young folks coming in junior positions. How do you go about kind of helping them figure out, that's an important ethic, giving back and participating in the community? And then, sometimes younger folks maybe struggle for how to do that, how to make those connections, how to access, board seats or volunteer opportunities.
They do. And we try to provide a couple of things. What's really interesting to see is a lot of these, you said some of the younger people and some of the people just starting in the industry. And, they have all kinds of needs themselves. They get to actually use some of the services that we're so used to supporting in terms of childcare and some of these things. So they get to, we talk about, they see what we're doing as a business, as individuals and as a business, and how we're investing these dollars and time, and it's impacting them also positively. But then we try, we can't be too overbearing, but we try to invite the staff to participate if they'd like. And there's always several events, at least during the year, that we can invite a lot of our staff to take some time and participate. We can't be too overburdening, but I know last year during the month of May, we offered the opportunity to volunteer for the Dragon's Hollow. We also offered them time for Habitat for Humanity and a couple others, and they embrace that, and then they can see what it's all about. Some of them do that without having to hold their hands. It's part of their fiber, and others kind of need you to point them in a direction, and then it's up to them to proceed.
Sure, absolutely. So we talked, I think it was a couple months back, we had you on our COVID collab series, and this was right when you were in the thick of sort of the CARES Act had just been passed, and the money was being pushed out through banks like First Security and others to get to families, to get to businesses, et cetera. You were in the thick of it, and you learned a lot about your organization and so forth. Tell us kind of about, with a couple months to reflect on that, not that we're out of the woods, but what's been your kind of take on how these programs sort of came together to hopefully benefit businesses and individuals in our community?
I'd be happy to. I am truly very, very proud of not only our crew and staff, but the staffs and crew of these other community banks that us in rural Montana truly should appreciate even more during these times. We're all hands on deck, trying our best to figure out, first of all, what these funds meant, how to apply for them, how to help your customers apply, how to, forgive the debt if it's at all possible, and a lot of education. But everybody, we had a lot of success in getting applications in and getting these small businesses funded. And my associates at other community banks throughout our area also did a very admirable job. So I want to applaud them. That wasn't the case in a lot of places. And so I hope, these, I call even Missoula rural community based on some of the big metropolitan areas. You should be very thankful for the banking services that you have. But anyway, that was all hands on deck, and it was crazy trying to figure it out because every day it was changing.
Right. And
so we got through that, and now we're at the point, and our customers got the money, and some used it, some didn't need to necessarily use it, but we got money out there in their hands. Now we're going through the process of the forgiveness piece of it, and if you recall, part or all of that debt should be forgiven if it was used properly. So we're trying our best. Those processes have continued to change, sometimes daily, but at least weekly. So we've just encouraged our customers to be patient because things have not really come around, and they've changed the deadlines as to when a lot of this had to happen. So we're going through that, and then while all this is happening, the Montana Board of Investments and the additional monies that they got out of the CARES Act has created the payment deferral program. So we got a crew still working on the PPP, and then this comes out. So we've dedicated another entire group to help our customers take advantage of these the deferrals. Up to in this program, they can defer the interest portion of their payments for up to 12 months. Actually, not just defer, the program pays for it. So we go from finishing up the PPP applications now to the MBOI applications, and we've had some really good success. We've just now gone through the process of getting approvals in place, and monies are actually being reimbursed to us to make those payments. So it's been a lot of work, and some, I mean, if you looked at it from the outside, you'd think us bankers were crazy because it didn't seem we knew what we're talking about, but the rules kept changing. It was absolutely nuts. But yeah, it's I think getting to the right people, to the right businesses. Is there more needed? Yeah, probably. I think there's gonna be, you really can't tell right now, Justin. There's so much fluff out there right now. You can't really tell who's struggling and who's not.
Right.
You can in some, but so many, if you're looking at it as a banker, you're seeing payments come in. You're saying, well, they're making their payments, but are they making that with stimulus money, or are they making it from cash flow?
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to know. We will not know for another year who really, really, really is struggling and who's not.
But overall, you're pretty bullish on the economic health of this community.
I am.
Yeah,
I am, and where we live, people are looking out for each other, and I love that. I mean, it's crazy out there right now, everything that's going on throughout our entire nation. But I think you still have some very caring people here, and we're gonna be there for each other to get through this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And you're seeing, I mean, we talked about it a little bit before we started recording today. You're seeing signs of some pent-up demand, particularly in the real estate side of things. It could be inventory driven and so forth. But yeah, talk about that.
It's it's really kind of funny. I look at anything like right now that's related to construction contractors and building, and both commercial and residential, and everybody there seems to be doing pretty darn well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're doing really well. Their biggest problem right now is getting product in because of everything that's happened, with PPP and with COVID throughout the nation. But there's a lot of, you look at the real estate market right now. I mean, it's really rare to be in a recession and have a housing shortage.
Yeah.
And having housing appreciation going on like we're seeing because of the shortage and the shortage of attainable and affordable housing. These are opportunities that I think are going to help us get out of this thing fairly quickly. We're seeing a lot of commercial growth where companies, they've been hit, but they're continuing on with some expansions that they had in mind. Pipelines are actually pretty strong. And if you look at it, Justin, the rest of the world in the United States, they kind of looked at Montana and they go, well, that's really kind of weird. They're not really getting impacted as much as everybody else is. And boy, I think we've all seen that. You can talk to the real estate industry, and there's a lot of stories out there about these properties being bought sight unseen, cash deals. In some respects, I think that's good. In other respects, is that going to artificially inflate real estate so our kids can't afford it? You got to think of it that way too.
Yeah, it's hard to know. I mean, there was a point, and at that point, maybe we're still in it, but you would look at a map a map that charted coronavirus cases across the country, and Montana looked pretty darn attractive. And I think we've seen a lot of that influx of folks either coming here to hide out, coming here to recreate their lives and raise their families in different ways, and all kinds of combinations of that. And that's going to put, like you said, sometimes that brings in cash deals and quick people buying up real estate quickly. Other times it changes the community in different ways. That's got to be something that you're observing and thinking about as not only a leader in the community, but a leader of a lending institution. Absolutely. We talk about it all the time. I'm part of these different organizations like Missoula Economic Partnership, and we want to make sure we grow, but we want to grow in the right way. We want our community to grow in the manner in which we're used to. We still want to have blue collar here. This can't be we don't want to turn this into another just tech outlying area and make things so unattainable in terms of price that you can't live here. So yeah, we got to promote all different levels of industry and all different kinds. We want it to be clean, of course. Don't want to start putting up smokestacks again, but
Yeah, I mean, you think about that all the time. Missoula is one of those areas too that, Bozeman, Missoula, the Flathead, really attractive outdoor opportunities that, people are starting to just, it's part of their lives, and they're thriving to become, to live it a lot more than they can in the metropolitan area. So I think we're naturally going to see people trying to move here, and that could stimulate some good things and hopefully stimulate some good jobs that we need.
Right. All sorts of opportunities and challenges. Speaking of opportunities, Scott, you mentioned MEP a moment ago, Missoula Economic Partnership. At your level, not a community investment involvement, development is a huge part of your value set. And I'm sure you get asked to do, you say yes to a lot of things, but you probably have to say no to some things, because you probably get asked to do a ton. How do you make choices about where you allocate your kind of passions at this time? When
I was a little bit younger in my career, I mean, I really, I like it. I love that part of it. I really do. I really like being parts of these other organizations, but it also has to tug at your heart a little bit too. You just can't become part of an organization that really doesn't mean anything to you. Mm-hmm. So I've always focused on things that, things related to kids, things related to family, things like that, have always kind of drawn me to it. And so back early, that's how I made decisions. And, having gone through quite a few organizations and terming out as a board member and all, today I really focus on where can I focus my time and some of the monetary side that is really going to, I guess in some respects, do the best we possibly can to better our community. And I mentioned MEP, but there's many others like that. So try to focus on a bigger picture a little bit. And also, after being in the community as long as I've had the opportunity, like I said, to sit on quite a few boards, so you don't have as many to choose from.
Sure. And one of the organizations that, and I'm speaking from a position of blatant self-interest here, but one of the organizations that you've dedicated so much time and energy to has been the University of Montana, the College of Business. This conversation is happening with the backdrop of you being awarded our Outstanding Alumni Award this year. And talk about your relationship to the university and why you've chosen to give back so much of your time and effort to this place.
I love the University of Montana, and I love the College of Business. You look back, and that was a long time ago, back in the early 80s. But I tell you, the experience I had and the people I met, both that are friends of mine today and even the professors that I was able to work, I just had such a wonderful experience. And it wasn't just the university. I think it was the community of Missoula. That's why we're back here. I had a great experience, and I love the people. And in terms of the School of Business, the level of instruction that we got was absolutely wonderful. I look back on some of those people that just had, just put a stamp I'll never forget them on. Rudy Good, John Wicks, Lee Tangadal, Jack Morton, Joe Weber, Maureen Fleming. It's just the list goes on. These are people I actually kind of like to go and listen to. and then Montana is so weird, such a big state, but it's just one big little city. Really is. I have met so many people back then that today they're my dear friends today. Mm-hmm. That's another reason we ended up finding our way back to Missoula, which many of them did the same. They left and found their way back. So I don't know. And I also know how important that university is to our overall economy, and not just Missoula, but the state of Montana. So I just, you're always going to have ups and downs. And I think higher education is, I think it's going through some transformation itself. Mm-hmm. Sometimes in all of our businesses, we see, things that are maybe broke. And I think the ones that succeed are the ones that find a way to adjust. And I think that's happening. And I think U of M's at that point right now under its current leadership, and they're making some adjustments. And hopefully we catch a few breaks here and there. And I think we're going to get back to what we're used to the U of M being. Just a great it's a great institution.
Yeah, I mean, it's an institution. I've been here 8 years, and it's been, it's been a challenging 8 years. This downward enrollment cycle we've been in, it's put a lot of pressures on the institution. Now this COVID situation is, it felt like maybe we were starting to turn things around, and then we got hit with this. There's some reason to think that we actually might respond. We might come out of this stronger, that it's a stress test that could really help us clarify the value we create and how we communicate that to our constituents. What makes you bullish on this place?
I'm a business leader, and I am an employer.
Mm-hmm.
And I look at the type of people that I want to hire today, and it's the type of people that have a very broad schooling, meaning in all areas, not just a single area in which they focus on.
Sure.
But a liberal arts school, I think if we structure them a little bit differently, take what we have in all these different areas throughout the institution and combine them into what us as business people are looking for, not just business people, but other professions. What we're looking for in terms of employees, we're gonna get ahead of the game. And I get it right now, with engineering and things that, our university doesn't have a big focus on. We still can create the type of employees that are so needed out there. People that can think.
Yeah.
People that can adjust. And I think that's going to be where we find success at the University of Montana.
I think so too, Scott. We align completely on that. I can't thank you enough for sharing your time and wisdom in this conversation, but more broadly, all that you do for this community, both through your work at the bank, but also through your incredible engagement and generosity through so many organizations here. We are proud to call you the Outstanding Alumni for this year. And I'm stoked to have you in our family, Scott. I appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Justin. And to be honest, just like my dear friend Hal Frazier, who's no longer here, he was always accused of everything that he did in the community. It wasn't just for the bank, it was to make the place that he lived a much better place. And that's what it's about.
Awesome. Well, thank you, and I look forward to our next conversation.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to A New Angle. We really appreciate it. A New Angle is underwritten by First Security Bank and Blackfoot, with support from the University of Montana College of Business and Consolidated Electrical Distributors. AJ Williams is our producer. Jeff Ament, John Wicks, and VTO made our music, and Jeff Meese is our master of all things sound. If you have any questions, suggestions, comments, insults, whatever, please email me at anewangle@umontana.edu. If you like what you heard, tell your friends about us. Thanks a lot, and see you next time.